we're looking at making a buttonhole with a domestic sewing machine when you don't have a buttonhole option or foot. A lot of machines come with a buttonhole foot, which is basically just a guide for the buttonhole to be formed on. But essentially, all the buttonhole is a zigzag stitch, 2 narrow zigzags and 2 wide short zigzags. So we'll just switch the foot to the regular foot that can do zigzag, and I'll show you how we do that. So the first thing we need to understand is the different widths that our machine can do. Find your stitch width regulator on your machine. My machine can go from 0 to 5. So what we're going to do is do a test to have a reference of what the widths our stitch can do. So I'm going to write down 0 through 5 and then do a test for each of those to understand the widths. Be sure to do this with a shortened stitch length so that you can accurately see the width of the zigzag. Once you have your sample piece laid out, take a minute to measure the stitches for the width and get an idea of what your machine can do. My machine ended up matching pretty well to millimeters, to the number. So 0 is 0 millimeters, so straight stitch. 5 is about 5 millimeters wide. Now to understand the buttonhole size, we measure the button. So this one is about 11 millimeters across and 2 millimeters deep. That means I'm going to make my buttonhole about 13 millimeters long. When I mark out the buttonhole, I'm not going to stitch between the 13 millimeters. My 2 wide bar tacks at either end of the buttonhole have to be on either side of my 13 millimeter markings. For my buttonhole, I'm going to do a width of 4.5 at the top, so lining it up to the top and the middle of my foot in the middle of my buttonhole, stitch 4.5 across a couple stitches in a pretty dense stitch, and then switch to my narrow zigzag, which I'm doing about 1.5, and then note as the needle's coming down on the left side to line up with the left side of your wide bar tack. Now you're going to stitch all the way down to the bottom of your buttonhole and then stitch just a little bit past your bottom mark. Now you can go up to the top again, and as your narrow zigzag is coming down on the right side, line it up to the right side of your wide bar tack at the top. Now you can stitch all the way down to the bottom, being sure to keep it straight, leaving room in the middle for you to cut it out later. So again, stitch slightly past your mark and then change your stitch width to your wide mark again. For me it's 4.5. And then as the needle comes down on the right side, I'm going to line it up with the right side of my buttonhole and the narrow stitching and back stitch a little bit, and now you have your buttonhole. This will take a bit of practice to get it right, so be sure to do plenty of samples until you feel comfortable before going and doing it on your project.